All right, okay, yeah, the mic is on. All right, we will go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us for the last session of the day. Again, I'll make the plea if anybody would like to move to the front, come on up. We're very friendly up here. The next session is to talk a little bit about Commissioner Mays, who is the NAIC president, his theme of minding the gap. And when I talk to some other NAIC folks and regulators, really the only way, well, the prevalent way individuals can obtain insurance coverage is typically by talking to an insurance agent or broker. And so we can talk a lot about minding the gap and those coverage gaps, but it's really the marketplace and these agents or brokers that are in the marketplace that are going to fill that gap and educate consumers about coverage options. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. The panelist, Carrie Kish, is the General Counsel and Policy Director for the Wholesale and Specialty Insurance Association. And Carrie is also a former NAIC. I worked with Carrie at the NAIC. I think you were there for about 6 or 7 years. It's been a while, but welcome, Carrie. And then next to Carrie is Lori Croy with the Missouri Department of Insurance. She's the Communications Director for the Department of Insurance in Missouri, and is also a children's book author. So we will, if we have time, I want to talk a little bit about some of your books. So
Did you write about the perils?
I don't
want to give away the end.
If we need to fill time, Lori will read a book to us. And then on the far end is Brian Blake, who is the Executive Director of the Central U.S. Earthquake Consortium. This is, I didn't know this consortium existed until about, 6 months ago. Lori contacted me about a potential continuing education program for insurance producers regarding earthquake insurance, and so that's how I met Brian. So we're very happy to have Brian to talk a little bit about earthquake risk and what his organization does. So we will go ahead and jump in. Similar to last session, real quickly, the learning objectives there you see on the screen. And again, I'll just reiterate the critical role of insurance producers in filling the gap for coverage. And then in particular on the wholesale market, for those who aren't familiar with that, Carrie's going to talk a little bit about her organization, her association, and what some of her members do in terms of availability and affordability of insurance, which is really an important piece. And then, again, let's talk about some strategies moving forward for a more inclusive and secure insurance landscape for everyone. So with that, here are the topics we want to cover today. And I think we want to start with a little bit on just the knowledge gap and the perspective that individuals see in the marketplace from the consumers. And as we did some of the planning calls, many times consumers don't even know they have a coverage gap. And so they're not educated, or if they have a coverage gap, they decide it's too expensive, or they don't know where to go to get assistance. So we want to talk a little bit about the consumer perspective first, and then with that, the role of your organizations in helping consumers fill those gaps.
All righty. Well, thank you. It's great to be here. Wonderful. I live in Kansas City, so I also travel that far. But WSIA, the Wholesale and Specialty Insurance Association, we are the national trade association predominantly representing the surplus lines industry. Our association is a little different than a lot of other trade associations because we represent both the insurers, the carriers, as well as the brokers. And then we have service provider members as well. So I think the important thing to remember when I'm talking is our interaction, our members' interaction with the consumers is zero. Our members, their agents, their clients are the retail agents, who we refer to as a retail agent in our industry. So Kate Jensen, when she was up here before, and represents the large brokers, and they are most of our members' clients, as are West Bissett's, the independent agents. They come to our members who are the wholesalers. They are the ones that have a connection, a contract, a appointment with usually the non-admitted market, the surplus lines market. And so I don't know that I can offer a ton on the consumer's perspective because our members aren't working with them directly, but our members do work with their clients, the retail agents, and brokers, in order to better understand what it is the consumers need and what they want, and to help educate them being their clients, the agents and brokers, as to what is available in the non-admitted market when it isn't available in the standard market. Those can also help develop certain products based on those conversations. If a retail agent is having difficulty finding a product from the standard market because maybe it doesn't exist yet, old school now, but good example is Uber, the sharing economy. When it first came out, wasn't able to be underwritten by the standard market, so the surplus lines market stepped up, came up with a product, and then it transitions and goes back to the standard market, which is the whole role. And so we see that too. I think one area that our members tell us that they work a lot on working with the retail agents are opportunities in the flood market, in the private flood market, that are available to consumers. And then hoping that consumers are interested in being able to take up those options if the standard market isn't writing them. Yeah.
From the communicator perspective, and I'm with the Missouri Department, I think we look at this as it's very difficult for us to be able to communicate with consumers if we don't know where those knowledge gaps exist. And so we started a journey working with Center for Insurance Policy and Research here at the NAIC, specifically about the earthquake insurance problem that we have in the state. We went from about 60% of the residences covered in the highest risk areas to about 10% in a 20-year span. And we didn't really fully understand why it happened. There was no data to tell us this. So we started a research project to determine, is it just cost, or is there something more that we didn't know about that we needed to determine? So these kinds of processes are collaborative things, and what we found is that many people thought that they were insured, that it was part of their homeowner's policy. Many people didn't have information about the risk of earthquake in their area because that information wasn't shared with them by people that were involved in their decision-making processes, family, friends, insurance agents, that sort of thing. So in the process of doing the research and creating education and awareness programs, we feel very strongly that one of the most trusted people in the decision process is that insurance producer. And do they have the knowledge that they need to be able to step in and be that information voice to help people know what their options are and how to make those choices?
Brian Blake with the Central U.S. Earthquake Consortium. I gather a lot of you have not heard of our organization, so I might, like Tim said, didn't know we existed a little while ago, or up until about 6 months ago. So I might talk a little bit about what we do. We're a coordinating organization, a nonprofit based in the Memphis, Tennessee area, and we work primarily with state emergency management agencies, FEMA, and others on earthquake awareness, planning, mitigation, and preparedness activities. And a big part of that strategy is education about topics like what to do during an earthquake, how to prepare your home, how to prepare yourself to recover through products like insurance. And so we do a lot in the education realm. And as Lori mentioned, so we cover a pretty wide geographic area where there are numerous seismic zones. Our states that we work most in are Arkansas, Alabama, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, Mississippi, Tennessee, and also South Carolina. And each of those states have significant earthquake hazard and risk, associated risk with that. So our challenge in working with multiple states is bringing together groups at the emergency management level, or working with groups like NAIC or the state departments of insurance, whatever they might be called from state to state, and working with them to develop strategies to get the word out about earthquake from all those things I mentioned. And anecdotally, we have seen time and again that there's just a constant influx of people into the region coming from California or out west where they have higher levels of earthquake hazard, and then they come to the Midwest and they had no idea that there is a risk at all. And so, you know, it's not a minor risk either. And at any given time, we have upwards of a 25 to 40% chance of having a damaging earthquake in our region. So the challenge is to get the word out, educate consumers, individuals, be it homeowners, business owners, as well as communities on this topic, among other things that they all have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And it's not just a central U.S. problem. There are a number of, in California, for instance, there's the California Earthquake Authority, which manages the statewide insurance for earthquake in California. And it's a challenge even out west to get people to understand their level of risk and what to do about it through insurance.
In terms of the level of risk, and I don't know, have you done any CAT modeling either, I guess, in Missouri or at your consortium in terms of kind of what it looks like in terms of property loss, you know, inability for businesses to operate, right. Whether it be an insured loss or those uninsured losses, what that might look like based upon different types of, you know, an earthquake that, yeah, the seismic level.
We have, yeah, in our region, our options for loss modeling are limited to some free tools created by FEMA that has this program. But we do that on a consistent basis, and that not only models economic losses, but also impacts to the built environment, sheltering, all sorts of things. For a New Madrid earthquake, for those of you that don't know, New Madrid seismic zone runs roughly from northeast Arkansas through the Boot Heel, Missouri area, and also into western Tennessee and western Kentucky into southern Illinois, and that's just one example. And if we were to have a large earthquake there, say a magnitude 7.5, somewhere near the Boot Heel, Missouri, you would have well over $50 billion in economic losses from that event. And our problem in the central U.S. is that oftentimes earthquakes, large earthquakes, happen in a sequence. So you could have a large earthquake 7.0 in December, and then another large earthquake happening in February and March. It's just the way that the fault structure is out where we are. So, yeah, high consequence event in terms of loss of life, damage to the built environment, and then economic losses as well.
And Lori, what are some of the things Missouri is doing to educate consumers?
I feel like I ought to start this with once
Individually.
upon a time.
Individually and
Once upon a
and
time.
locally.
So fair warning, I'm a little bit of an earthquake geek. So, you know, I promise if I start seeing people with their phones scrolling and the yawning, I promise I'll stop. Missouri has a great wealth of earthquake insurance data. So I kind of explained a little bit about that earlier. We saw that we had a big problem and we didn't know what we didn't know. We could make the assumptions that all of the reasons for that downtrend were because of cost, because costs had gone up many percentages. But we needed to go directly to the consumers who were not buying those policies to find out what their reasons were. And when we started gathering that information, we started developing education and awareness marketing campaigns to start trying to close the knowledge gap and to help people understand the risk, what information they needed to make decisions, and what their options might be. So we all know that in the world of the departments of insurance, we don't sell insurance. So we have to be very careful that we are giving people information and options that they can explore. So we have done campaigns for about the last 5 years or so, increasing the investment that we make during the time periods that those run, gathering data every time we do those campaigns, and then learning from that. We work with Brenda Rourke in CIPR. She's a communications researcher, and we actually did a market test this year of some different types of appeals to see exactly what type of appeal would catch people's attention and get them to listen to the message. Brenda really wanted to use the fear appeal. She was so attached to the fear appeal. But consumers seeing that were more about urgency. It was the sound of the ticking clock. It was the act now. Are you ready? Do you have a plan? Encouraging them not to waste time because we don't know how much time we have to make those decisions and those choices. So this year, it's been a Missouri campaign for the last several years. This year, we have partnered with commissioners and PIOs in other member CUSEC states, Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, and so forth. And we have created videos, radio spots, graphics. Thank you to my team at the table for following the instructions and coming to this last presentation of the day. I'll give you your treat, which is thank you for creating all those nice tools. And then we have shared those with all of those other state departments of insurance to freely use. All of this is going to add to the data that we collect about what consumers do and don't understand and what kind of messages appeal to them and do they take any actions. I will say that until this year, the numbers kept trending downward and we were at, I think, 10-point-something% coverage in those high-risk areas in Missouri. This year, even during tough economic times, we saw our first 0.5% bump up in uptake of earthquake insurance. Now, there could have been a lot of things that were responsible for that uptick, but I'm claiming it was the marketing campaigns. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I'm sure it was. Do you want to talk a little bit about the CE course you're going to offer to producers? So, right, you have the stream directly to consumers, but how are you engaging with the producer community?
Yes, so one of the things that we learned is that insurance producers, of course, are primary resources that people use to make those important decisions. Not really a big surprise, they probably should be. But what we also know is that not every insurance agent has a depth of knowledge about the same topic, the earthquake risk and about earthquake insurance and those products, because they obviously aren't selling as much of that as they do some of the other things. So we have put together an educational webinar for CE credit for insurance agents. This is kind of the beta version of this that will be held next week. I think, I don't know, we sent out to, I think 3 states provided their data sets to us, and we have about 170 some odd signed up already. And we'll learn from that. We'll find out what producers respond to and what more we can do to fill the knowledge gap there as well. And hopefully, when we do this a second time, the process will be smoother and we'll have lots more people signing up, and we'll be able to help them be able to prepare themselves for the people that this campaign will be pushing their way. Is that what you wanted?
Yeah, and I know this is not we've already had a session on uniformity and reciprocity, but I know going through the process to get the CE approval and, that it was a fairly significant time that you took. So I think, again, it's a really important project for the producer community and consumers. So, yeah, hopefully, as it goes out to maybe a second iteration, it'll be improved. So, all right. Well, the second bullet that you see there, insurance availability and insurance affordability. And Carrie, I know we talked a little bit about this on the planning call, kind of the distinction between those two and whether or not there's a true availability problem or is it an affordability problem. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what your members see and for what products in particular.
Sure. So obviously, once again, in our market, this is going to be the hard to place risks, the new risks, the risks that are probably more expensive, but our members would report that there are people out there, there are firms, there are carriers, there are products out there available for almost anything and everything. The issue is affordability. And so it is expensive right now in a lot of risks. And you have to, look at it from the underwriting perspective on why it is expensive. I know in talking to our members, there's still a lot of work that they are doing, trying to bring premium down to make it more affordable. But those products are out there and available. I don't know though. Like I said, we're not dealing directly with consumers. I don't have an insurance agent. I mean, I have insurance, but I'm a USAA member. So when they don't call me and say, do you want earthquake? Do you want flood? I'm like the dream child probably. I called them and signed me up for flood. I've got earthquake after that 2018 shaking that we had. Anything in an umbrella, sure, throw it in, I mean, I'll take it. So, but if you are an agent who is working with the consumer and you are presenting what to them, what their premiums are going to be that year, and it's already gone up, and maybe they've lost a few bits of their normal coverage in order to try to keep it affordable. And then you go in and say, have you really, I know you're not required to have flood insurance, but you really need to think about it, or earthquake. I mean, my parents would think that someone was trying to sell them oceanfront property in Kansas.
Yeah.
And so it's hard there too. So just shout out to all the people doing the hard work to try to help educate all of us.
0.5%, just remember that, 0.5%.
Yeah, Lori, I think that's a good question, right? I know producers, right, when they're trying to assist the consumer, they'll say, well, I'm not in a floodplain. You're just trying to oversell me a product. There's no earthquake happening here. You're just trying to sell me a product. How do we overcome
Is that part of
some of
the
those
CE?
challenges?
Yeah. Yeah, like on our webinar, for example, anybody wants to join, I don't know if there's a link, but go to the CUSAC website. We're going to talk about how the agents, producers can access information on what the earthquake risk is specific to their area. And we have some pretty good tools to do that, maps, links, address searchable, and so forth. That comes from authoritative data sources. It might not be specific to the building that they're looking at insuring or interested in. For instance, if a wood frame home performs a lot better than an old 150-year-old brick building during an earthquake. So there are a lot of considerations that go into what options there are, which kind of determine that affordability part. And but what we need to do better at, and I think this webinar is a good first step at that, is educating the educators, which in this case are the agents and producers, as to what is the hazard here locally, and is this something we should even be concerned about? So the answer is not always yes, that earthquake insurance is needed, so we want to provide tools and access to how they can determine that.
Anything else, Lori, on that? No. So, okay. Are there questions from the audience? Any issues in a particular state you'd like to share? Any success stories?
Get some over here.
Any horror stories?
I should say I got that flood insurance after I was at the NEIC meeting in Philadelphia and came home to a flooded house.
This is a poster child right here.
So you had to wait for 30 days, just in case, right?
Yes.
So, that's loud. So my question is, for a lot of homeowners around the country, they're having a hard time getting coverage, or businesses getting coverage. And this is not just in California. We've heard stories of Iowa, Minnesota. And my question is when these consumers go to their agent and their agent says, well, I can't find you any coverage, or I can find you very limited coverage, what would be the type of questions that you would say that they need to ask their agent who, should they say, Carrie, hey, you need to go to the surplus lines market, find me wraparound coverage? I mean, what would you suggest to those consumers that are talking with their agents, or what should these agents know about each of your organizations?
I don't know. I guess I have an aunt here in town who has experienced not being able to get covered and coverage. And so I told her, you go to your agent, ask the questions, ask how many markets they went to, if they're an independent agent, how many markets they have, if they worked with their wholesale broker. Questions I think that you would not normally be expected to ask, but need to know. And then, look at other agents if you have to, who have additional markets, because like we said, there are markets out there, but there also, you might be hampered by the markets that you represent not being available to those individuals. And so I think it's really important when you talk about shopping. I mean, you have the shopper's guides, really helping the consumers understand how they do that. And then our work is close with, Big I, CIAB, PIA, on helping our members and their members connect to help them in order to expand their markets too, because just like agents have certain markets, our members as wholesale brokers have certain markets too, and you may need a variety as an agent and broker. Retail agent and broker, again, is what we term them, multiple wholesale brokers, because they're going to also have different markets. It's all about all the markets now that you have to try to access.
This is for Carrie. And so we have so many producer licensing folks in the audience.
Yes, I like NARAB.
Yeah, I know.
And uniformity and reciprocity.
Yeah. That's going to be the giveaway next year. We're going to have sweatshirts that say "I love NARAB." But what percentage would you say of your surplus lines brokers also hold a producer license in the admitted market?
In the admitted market? Well, most of them are going to have, I think in almost every state you have to have a property and casualty underlying license. So they're going to do that. If the question is what amount, do they do any admitted business? Is that kind of one of the things that you want to know? So some of our members will do admitted business, but they're still doing it on a wholesale basis. Yeah. So there are times when a retail agent will go to a wholesale broker and utilize them still for the admitted market. It doesn't mean it is just surplus lines. The amount of business, I don't know. The AM Best report just came out yesterday for the surplus lines market, and in 2023, the surplus lines market was $115 billion. Our members would tell you that it's important that for when you're identifying them in that report, emphasizing that is, the surplus lines market, because they do benefits, they do work comp and auto, which are not written on a surplus lines basis. I'm sorry, I can't tell you a percentage. It's not significant, over what they do for the wholesale on the surplus sides.
It's just an important fact that I think, especially in the broker space, they're being dual licensed, and so that's a whole nother level of the fees and process that the producers have to face down.
I really love hearing about the educational tools that you guys are putting together for consumers and for brokers, and this idea that you can have public access to data about what are the actual risks in my community. And Tim may or may not be involved in this might not be a fair question, but my understanding is that the NAIC right now is working on a regulator-facing tool to help regulators understand sort of the catastrophic risks in their jurisdictions, coverage gaps, so on and so forth. But I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for y'all to get plugged in for a broker or public-facing project there, and potentially what you guys are working on. Sounds like it could be a really good pilot effort, and it sounds like right now it's focused on earthquake risk, but gosh, it just feels like there's a huge need and would be a tremendous demand for that type of tool and resource.
Yeah, we developed, I'm sorry. No. We developed quite a number of like map products around earthquake and You know, there are any number of public-facing tools that oftentimes are hard to use by the average person. So what we're trying to do is really focus on usability, plug in an address, get a real kind of high-level report or summary of what are my potential risks for these type of hazards. I know FEMA has a lot of information. They've developed a national risk index tool, but if you plug that in at ground zero in the New Madrid seismic zone, and it says that the earthquake risk in Lake County, Tennessee, for example, is low, which is not true. And it's not low, especially the hazard is as high as it can get. And then it's a rural community, so, you know, if they were impacted by even a moderate size earthquake, it could put their community sustainability at risk. So there's a lot of challenges to getting the presentation part right. And with a lot of the products we're working on, we're trying to do that so that it's accessible and people understand it as well. We talked about it earlier this morning. There was an earthquake in Utah. It was a moderate size earthquake, somewhere around a magnitude 6.0 or 6.2 in Salt Lake City. There's a really good article. I encourage you to look it up. Just Google like Salt Lake City earthquake insurance, and you'll get some kind of evidence of how a moderate earthquake can affect, because they don't happen that often. So we're used to the floods and tornadoes and hurricanes and all that stuff, but how the knowledge gap affects your average citizens. And case in point, where one homeowner couple was impacted by the earthquake, basically had a new-ish mortgage that they were pumped about, but then all of a sudden the earthquake did enough damage to basically cause their house to be uninhabitable. And the quote in there was like, now I have $150,000 lawn ornament because they can't use their home anymore, and they still have a mortgage on it. And so this whole education and awareness piece is important, along with providing access to risk information.
One of the reasons we started down this path in the first place is because some folks at FEMA came to talk to us about how can we help them convince people that FEMA is not insurance.
Right.
So let me just say that all of those, all of the news stories, the visuals coming out of Katrina, for instance, FEMA's there, they're handing out checks, they're getting people into temporary residences, and somehow in the process of all of this, people have shifted their perception of FEMA is going to give me free money and I'm not going to buy insurance. This affects us with floods. They just came back and asked if we could do the same kind of thing with regard to flood, which we're doing. We're going to be doing the same kind of flood campaign, doing a benchmark in January, and then we're going to start down the same path, doing the same kind of research, the same kind of exploration to see what we can do to change perceptions, because that's half the battle. Is there a problem? Do people know it's their problem? And that someone's not going to come and hand them a check and make them whole. You know, those things that are done by entities like FEMA were always supposed to be stopgaps to provide you with time to be able to get things together, temporary roof, some personal belongings, that sort of thing. And somehow in the public's eye, that is morphed into a replacement for insurance. And so we're working to try to pull away from that and to refocus people's attention on the roles of the different people that are working in that space, and we're doing it together. FEMA is a partner, CUSEC is a partner, state departments of insurance, NAIC, anyone that we can get to help us with that. So I really appreciate your comment about feeling that there's value in the educational opportunities on so many topics that we can provide not just to insurance producers, but to also consumers. And let's not forget those community leaders who have a great deal of influence on how the people in those communities prepare.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned, so Tony Hake from FEMA was to join us. He had a conflict that came up, but correct me if I'm wrong, but when we had the planning call, I think he referenced the average FEMA payout is $4,500.
Correct. Yep. Correct.
So this perception that FEMA is going to come in and write a check and rebuild your house, it's just not true. So that's why, right, the private marketplace is so critically important, because FEMA is not, people are not going to be made whole.
And the max is $45K if you check all, if your situation checks all the boxes, you know, so.
Yeah. And that's after a disaster declaration.
Right.
And if you're in a community that is a part of that disaster declaration, and all those things cost time. And so we actually did a decision chart as part of our consumer-facing deliverables. And it shows what sorts of decisions they have to make in a situation like this. And if you have insurance, then this is the path that you can travel. If you don't have insurance, then the options are very sparse, and you become reliant on others to assist you. But you still have a mortgage, you still have a need to bring some income in, you still have to take care of your family, and maybe your job's gone too, depending on what's happened. So again, all educational opportunities, but we have to educate at every single level.
I think we have, yeah.
Thank you for your discussion, especially including insurance affordability, which brought up for me, how much is the average earthquake premium?
Okay, can you repeat that?
So I think the question is, in terms of the affordability, what is the average earthquake premium?
I can't tout that right off the top of my head, but it varies. In Missouri, we actually have that information. We have a new report out about earthquake residential insurance on the insurance.mo.gov site, and you can get all of that information in depth, thanks to our market regulation folks. But it can vary in our state. I think I pay, and I'm in one of the lower hazard areas. I think I pay $160 a year for mine. In the highest risk areas, it can be $2,000 a year. And that's also some of the lower socioeconomic parts of the state. So there's a huge variance depending on the level of risk, where you live, the type of structure, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I live here in Kansas City on the Kansas side, maybe 15 minutes from here. I remember when I first got it, my first year a few years ago was $96, and it's not that much more now. I'm around 120 probably.
Yeah, it's important too to know like that, most of us probably know, but for earthquake coverage, it generally is talking about ground movement of some kind. So we have to also say, even if your earthquake risk is low, if you're on the side of a hill and you have a landslide, that's usually part of that earthquake as well. So there's a landslide, sinkhole, all those, fire following an earthquake. All of those things need to be considered when we're doing education to agents and the insurance community to help ensure that they know to tell the consumers about those things too.
I think one of the trickiest things to try to convey to people is we have conditioned them to think about deductibles in one way. And earthquake insurance breaks all of those rules. 10% of the value of your home, or, whatever you qualify for. And trying to get their brain to move from, my deductible for a $200,000 home is $20,000, to understanding that if you don't do something, you lose $180,000 of your investment and can't pay off the existing mortgage. And so again, it's just changing people's perceptions, how they think about something, so they can make a decision that's right for them and their family.
Yeah, other questions or comments? We have about 5 minutes left. The last bullet point in terms of kind of moving forward, kind of give each panelist any thoughts in terms of what's working well, what we can take forward, or new strategies that people should be taking a look at.
Do you want to go first at the end?
Sure. I would say a couple of things. It really does take a village, as Lori mentioned, between CUSEC and the State Emergency Management, state departments of insurance, FEMA, the U.S. Geological Survey. So from our standpoint, it is a village mindset and also a long-term issue. Your everyday citizen has so much going on in their life already than worrying about whether or not they need earthquake insurance or that they even have an earthquake risk. So it's a tricky balance of getting the village together and then trying to make this incremental progress. And that's, for us, is kind of the approach we have to take, because earthquakes aren't happening every day that are affecting people all the time, but they are coming.
Yeah.
I would say one of the things that's been critically important every step along the way is the gift of data. I'm a big believer in data-driven communications, and being able to know with certainty what we're working with, what we're working against in terms of people's not being aware of the decisions they need to make and the options that they have. So across all of the affected states, whether you're working with earthquake or flood or whatever the circumstances may be, being able to gather data for whatever purpose you can and then sharing it with each other, because we all learn from others' experiences. So that's something that's been really important to me, to be able to share with other states what I have and for them to gather and to feed back in so that we can know more about what we can do moving forward, building a strategy.
I really liked in Karen's presentation, the picture she showed that insurance is complicated. There are a lot of steps, and I think if you look at for where our members are in that, it was towards the back of the line, because you're the market of last resort often, unless there's a residual market, and the safety valve. And I think the important part of the relationship is the relationship between the consumer and their agent. And then when it comes to us, the agent and their wholesaler, the wholesaler and their carrier. And always remembering that even though I've emphasized a number of times, we don't work with the consumer directly, it's all about the consumer. That product was built for the consumer, and the advocacy in trying to get them the best rate and product is all about that consumer. And I think we just need to continue to build on that and recognize that.
Well, yeah, I look forward to hearing how the CE goes. And hopefully that can be replicated. And it sounds like, again, you're getting good participation and registration. So for those in the Midwest, if you know producers out there, sign up for this earthquake training. It is CE approved in how many states?
Well, I think at least a few, because we've got Tennessee, Kentucky, and Missouri so far.
Good.
That we know it's approved, yeah.
Yeah, all right. All right, well, that's, I believe that's about all. Unless there's any other questions, we will wrap it up. Again, I want to thank the panelists, and then we can move on to our evening activities, I believe, so wherever it may be. Thank you.
Thank y'all.